pleasure to introduce you to our first keynote speaker, Molly Bloom.
I'm Molly Bloom. Do you know about me? This is a true story.
You ran games in LA for roughly 8 years?
Yeah.
And then you ran games in New York for roughly 2.
I haven't run a game in over 2 years, not to spoil the ending. But that's when the government raided my game and took all of my money, assuming all of it was made illegally, which it wasn't. In this room, you couldn't buy your win.
I'm all in.
You couldn't buy me, and you couldn't buy a seat at the table.
Movie stars, athletes, billionaires, that's just the tip of the iceberg. You're not taking a percentage of the pot?
No.
Keep it that way because you don't want to break the law when you're breaking the law.
Am I breaking the law?
Not really.
We're able to find out for sure, aren't we? Laws are written down.
You had meetings in LA about your book and life rights.
I did.
You spent 8 years running the world's most exclusive, glamorous, and decadent man cave.
Any offers?
Guarantee the publishers certain elements, then I can get you $1.5 million.
What kind of elements? I passed.
I'm just curious as to why you passed on what would appear to be the only way out you have.
You have to use real names.
Creative differences. The law that I'm accused of breaking defines gambling as betting on games of chance.
Yes.
Poker's in a game of chance. Poker's a game of skill.
Why does a young woman who at 22 has a gold-plated resume, why does she run poker games?
Your risk is nuts. You're gonna get blown up.
You got 2.8 million on the street right now. That money should be in your hands.
Just how deep into the Russian mob were you? There's a new offer on the table. Complete immunity. We hand over the hard drive.
You've seen what's on those hard drives. Families, lives, careers will be ruined.
Why are you in this alone? Where are the people you're protecting by not telling the whole story?
It's not their names. I'm protecting Charlie. It's mine.
Tell me why!
Because it's all I have left. Because it's my name.
Hello, it's a real honor to be here and to tell you my story, and then we're going to do a little Q&A after, so I'd like to get to know you too. Before all that happened, I was a pretty normal kid growing up in a small town in Loveland, Colorado. I was the firstborn daughter to 2 parents who really took their job of raising humans very seriously. My mom taught us to do the right thing and to have integrity and care about our name, no matter what. And my dad basically just required us to be excellent in anything that we did. He taught us to show up and overcome our fears. And so things were going super well, you know, these first few years of life, and then my brothers were born. And they ruined everything. They ruined everything not just because they were born, but they were born these tiny evil prodigies. I'm not kidding. My youngest brother was an athletic prodigy, kind of just came out, you know, fast and quick, and he went on to become a 3-time world champion, 2-time Olympic skier. When he decided to retire from skiing, he went straight from the Turin Olympics to the NFL Combine, where he got drafted 5th round to the Philadelphia Eagles. Yeah. My middle brother was the genius, and he went on to become a Harvard-educated cardiothoracic surgeon. So this is my dinner table, you know? I was never gonna be the smartest or most talented person in the room, and that kept me up at night. I really wanted a significant life. I wanted my life to matter. I wanted to experience these things that my brothers were experiencing and see the look on my parents' faces when they had when they achieved. And so I decided that I would just never quit. And my kind of special power would be that I would keep going and keep trying and fail after failure until something happened. And the first place that I applied that was my mogul skiing career. I wanted to go to the Olympics too. And I didn't have the natural skill set that my youngest brother had. And on top of that, at 12 years old, I was diagnosed with scoliosis. My back was curved to the degree of 63 degrees. And the doctor said that I had to have almost emergency spinal surgery because I was already starting to suffer lung function. And so they sat me down and they said, this surgery is going to consist of taking bone out of your hip, fusing it in between your vertebrae. The top 11 vertebrae are going to be fused into a solid bone, and 2 middle rods will be placed down the length of your spine. Well, this is not an ideal condition for an Olympic mogul skier. And following that, they said, you know, your ski career is over and you're going to need to choose safer sports. But that just really wasn't an option for me. I mean, skiing was this huge part of my family, and I was also 12 years old and pretty much well established in the practice of not listening to adults. So for a year, I got the surgery. For a year, I let my spine heal, and then I was back on the snow. And I worked really hard for the next 8 years. I showed up to training early, and I left late, and I played through pain, and I learned about constructive suffering and discipline. And at 19 years old, I made the US ski team. At 20, I was 3rd overall in North America. And at 21, I made it all the way to the Olympic qualifiers. And I stood at the top of that mountain, and I thought, everything comes down to this moment, you know? I was 21, that's not true. But at 21, you don't realize that. And I stood at the top of the course, and this is what happened.
Good snow contact, calm upper body, legs together, good shape, no line deviation. Set up for the D-spin, and stick the landing. Now, 2 things you need to know before the second trick, which will be a 720. The first is that when visibility is bad the way it is now, race officials toss pine boughs on the course so the skiers have some foreground depth reference. The second is that the tightness of your bindings is determined by what's called a DIN setting. If you're a beginner, your DIN setting is probably 2 or 3. If you're an experienced weekend skier, it's probably 7 or 8. Mine's 15. My boots are basically welded to my skis, right? So how does this happen? It happened because I hit a pine bough that had become frozen in the snow. And I hit it so precisely that it simply snapped the release of my bindings. Right in that moment, I didn't have time to calculate the odds of that happening, because I was about to land pretty hard on my digitally remastered spinal cord, which was being held together by spare parts from an erector set.
And so my ski career ended that day. I had to retire. And it wasn't because I didn't show up. It wasn't because I didn't work hard. It was because I tripped on a stick. And if only I would have known how many more times I'd trip on that metaphorical stick going forward. But this was my first big failure in life, and my heart was broken. I sat in my classroom at the University of Colorado. I was in my final year. I had just taken the LSAT. If you saw the movie, I'm going to be real honest. Aaron inflated my LSAT scores. But I had taken the test, and I had done well, and I was applying to top-tier law schools. But I sat in that classroom in the University of Colorado, and I looked at those mountains, and my heart was broken. And I couldn't finish that semester, so I decided that I was going to take a year off. And I just wanted to be warm and be a kid. You know, I'd been chasing winter my whole life, and so I went to my parents with this proposition that I just wanted some money for a little year off to be warm and to be a kid. And they said no, because they're smart. But I did it anyway. I took the money I had from my summer job, I packed my Jeep Grand Cherokee, and I headed for LA. And I drove into LA, and I got there, and I knew I needed a job almost immediately. So the next day I went to Beverly Hills, and I applied for a restaurant job. On the application, it said, must have fine dining experience. Okay, well, I'm from Loveland, Colorado. The nicest restaurant I'd been to up to that point was called the Black Steer. It was not exactly fine dining. But I thought, how hard can this be? You know, I'll just fudge it. Well, apparently in Beverly Hills, it's a big deal. And I knew nothing about fine dining, and so within 2 weeks, I was fired. My boss came into the office and said, or into the restaurant and said, you're the worst waitress we've ever seen. You have no hope. But, you know, we noticed that you show up to work early and you leave late, and so I want to offer you a job as my personal assistant. Now, I'd heard rumors about this guy and seen him a couple times interacting with the staff, and he was not a desirable character. He was over-leveraged, aggressive. He definitely would not have survived an HR department today. But I was out of money, and I didn't want to go home, so I said yes. And working for him was demeaning at times and humiliating, but I don't know, maybe it's that competitive spirit. I stuck with it. And he came into the office one day and he said something that sounded pretty innocent at the time, but that would change my life forever. He said, "I need you to try to look halfway decent and serve drinks at my poker game tomorrow night." I was like, okay, how hard can that be, you know? But I wasn't are there poker players in here? I won't tell. A couple in the back there. I had no idea what this, anything about poker culture, what the game was. So I went home and I Googled things like, what kind of music do poker players like to listen to, and what do they eat? And I made this super embarrassing playlist with songs like The Gambler on it. And I went to the local supermarket and I got a cheese plate. And I showed up to the game, which was in the basement of this kind of like ratty nightclub. And I thought, okay, overgrown frat boys that want to play poker on a Tuesday night, how hard can this be, right? It's the second time I thought this. So imagine my surprise when Leonardo DiCaprio walked in the room, and then Ben Affleck, and then a politician who will remain unnamed, and a rap star, and the head of the biggest movie studio, and one of the, a CEO of one of the biggest banks. And so all of a sudden, I'm standing in the corner mortified about my playlist and my cheese plate, but also kind of having a light bulb moment, which was, I'm pretty sure this is not an opportunity that a 22-year-old kid from Loveland, Colorado gets. This is an opportunity to create a network, to build a network, to have proximity to information and power and capital. And so I really wanted to stay in this room. And then at the end of the night, I made like $3,000 for refilling Diet Coke, so I was in. I went home over the next couple weeks, and I watched YouTube videos on poker tutorials. I wanted to get some basic information on how this game was played, what the rules and objectives were. And then over the next couple months, what I studied was the customer. I studied the player. I wanted to know why these people who had access to literally anything and anyone in the world, why they wanted to come religiously and play this game in this dingy basement. And what I landed on is something that I think we are aware of now, which is things weren't really that interesting to them anymore. This was about experiences. And so that led me down this path of building on this experience. How do I create this experience that, amplifies the fantasy, the community, the mythology? And so I started working on that. I started forming alliances. I started conferring value in different ways, building on this experience. And a lot of the players took note, and they started trying to hire me away from my crazy boss. And my crazy boss got jealous and threatened. And he called me in the office and said, "You're done with the poker game. You need to go pick up my dry cleaning and give me the list of the players and all their debts." Well, I had been doing this for about 8 months now, and I'd made a lot of money. But even more than that, I saw that this was an incredible opportunity for me, that I could build a business, and that I could also use this as kind of like a Trojan horse to be able to infiltrate any subset of society I wanted to. I wanted to learn about the tech industry. I could have a tech game. I wanted to learn about finance. I could have a finance game. Hollywood. I mean, the sky was the limit in terms of this vehicle for networking, for education. And it was lucrative. Let's not forget about that. So I knew that I couldn't go back to just picking up his dry cleaning, and so that I had to make a move. And so I planned a game. And utilizing what I had learned about experiences and how all the variables matter, I started to put the plan into place. I moved the game to the Four Seasons penthouse in Beverly Hills. I hired people, and I sat them down and had them memorize everybody's personal drink order, food order, what their job was. Because what I've seen in my life is no matter what someone's station, everybody wants to feel seen, heard, and remembered. I raised the stakes. The buy-in was $10,000 at this time. I raised it to $50,000. It was quite a jump, but I wanted this to make noise. I wanted this game to market itself. I made sure that all the celebrities showed up, and then I invited everyone except for my boss. And I knew that I was a long shot here, you know? I was a 23-year-old kid going up against the Billionaire Boys Club, asking them to forego one of their own and come with me. But I believed that in the power of experiences. And so the game happened, and everybody had an incredible time. And at the end of the game, they said, "We're going with you." And this was a huge victory for me, and a real big teaching lesson that sometimes you've got to just go big, take the risk, because you don't know what's on the other side of that. So I ran this game for 6 years. I made millions of dollars. I had an incredible network. I had an incredible adventure, an incredible education. I got to learn about some of the leading industries from the luminaries at the top of those industries. And things were going super well. In the last year, I came upon a big problem. One of the players, who was one of the most famous players, very famous A-list actor who we've all seen in many movies, loved this game, was a regular player, was cutthroat and savage at the table, which was a little undesirable, but people seemed to be okay with it. But then I realized that he was cheating. He was cheating with another player. And I knew that I had to call him out on this, and I knew that that was going to cost me. This is someone with a big ego, with a lot of power. But I had to do the right thing. So I called him out on it and told him that he had a week to fix it, pay back the money, and stop. And instead of doing that, he went behind my back and he took the game. And he called me the day before the next game and said, "Don't bother showing up, you're done." So in a moment, it was over, like tripping on that stick, you know? Life changes in an instant. And man, was I upset. You know, this thing that I had built, this thing that made me feel like somebody, you know, pride of ownership, it was all done. And I could have gone away. I could have started a company. I could have raised a lot of capital at that time. I had a really powerful network. I could have gone back to law school. That's certainly what my parents wanted me to do. I could have really done anything, but I was pissed. So I decided not only was I not going to go away, I was going to go bigger. And I was going to build an empire, and I was going to do that in New York City. I was going to build the biggest high-stakes underground poker game that the world had ever seen. And I thought that, you know, New York City would be a great place to do that. I thought Wall Street's all about gambling, right? The only problem with my ingenious plan was that it was 2008. And maybe not the best year to build the biggest high-stakes poker game on Wall Street. I just focused on the concept. I hired socialites. I took international trips. I made deals with casino hosts. I made deals with hotel managers. I just recruited my butt off until the end of 2008. I had, in fact, built the biggest high-stakes poker game in the world. It was a $250,000 buy-in. It was populated by billionaires, Wall Street titans, sports stars. This time, I decided I wasn't going to be replaceable. I wasn't just going to leave my game, leave my creation, leave my hard work up to the whim of somebody who didn't like a choice that I made. I decided that the way I was going to do this was I was going to become the bank. I was going to vet the players, extend credit, and settle the game on my own dime. This was a huge move. In terms of customer experience, this was the ultimate. The gamblers are always, their biggest fear, if they're not in Vegas, is that they're not going to get paid. So this was, this put me well above the competition. And my concept was, my thesis was, even though I'm taking a big risk here, even though I will cover if someone stiffs, if I'm doing my job properly, if I have the best product in town, if I have a game, the biggest game in town, the most capitalized game in town, if I have a game where you can come play next to your idols, where hedge funds are getting formed, where movies are getting made, and I'm doing my background on these people to make sure that they can pay, that they're going to pay. And this worked. the thing that stopped working was me. Because what had traditionally been for me about entrepreneurship and going big and having heart and guts became about greed, and I really started to lose my way. Every minute I wasn't running this big game, I was out recruiting for smaller games. I recruited until I had a game running every second of every day and every night. I had millions of dollars on the street every week. I never slept. I lost touch with my family because they really didn't like what I was doing and I didn't want to hear it. I stopped having meaningful relationships. I stopped sleeping. And I started really losing myself. And I started doing drugs to stay up all the hours that the games would go. And I started doing drugs to come down and deal with this anxiety and this emptiness inside of me. And so, as you can see, this train's starting to come off the tracks. But don't worry, I still have like 2.5 years of bad decision making before the whole thing blows up. So other than losing myself a bit, things were already starting to happen around me that were contributing to the demise of this. I had a game in LA, and this guy was the star of it. His name was Brad, and we affectionately called him Bad Brad because in 4 years, he never won a hand of poker. He was so great for business, but it wore on me morally, so I pulled him aside in the beginning and I said, Brad, I don't think this game is for you. And he said, please don't take my seat. I love the game. I love playing with the guys. Can I stay? I said, yeah, but can I get you like a coach or something? Anyway, something strange started to happen. Even though Brad would come and cheerfully lose hundreds of thousands of dollars at the game, he started talking about his insane returns in his hedge fund. And people started to invest money with him. I'm like, this is the bad Brad that doesn't know which hand beat which. Yeah. Anyway, Bad Brad raised $30 million at the table for his Ponzi scheme. So everyone thought that they were hustling Bad Brad, but Bad Brad was hustling us. Yep. So what happened was, eventually Brad got caught. And he was very forthcoming to the feds about this poker game that he had lost $6 million in. And 2 things happened from that. One, we all got sued for the money that he lost in the game. We had to pay it back, which was probably justice. 2, we're now, the tabloids get a hold of this story. So now this game that had been secret underground was in every tabloid in the country. And 3, now I'm on the radar of the West Coast feds. But I'm still doing it legally up until this point. I had retained corporate criminal attorneys on both coasts, and in the beginning, and I said, show me how to do this legally. They said, pay your taxes. So I incorporated. I had an event planning company. And they said, don't take a rake. A rake is what Vegas does when you play at the tables and they take a percentage of each pot. I was operating on tips. There was an unwritten rule about my game. 9 seats. If you want your seat, you take care of the host. I was also extending, millions of dollars of credit to people. And so I was making $5-6 million a year on tips alone. And so up until this point, I'm doing everything very legally. But I had just recruited the biggest players of my life. These were Russians from Brighton Beach, and their stories checked out. I had private investigators vetting everyone within an inch of their lives. And these guys were educated and sophisticated, and all they wanted to do was play poker for huge amounts all day and all night. And kind of like the Bad Brad situation, when these things look too good to be true, they are. And the games were enormous. I saw someone lose $100 million at these games. Turns out these guys were not legitimate businessmen. They were running the biggest health insurance, auto insurance fraud schemes in New York City history. And they had deep ties to the Russian mob. So don't ever hire me to recruit for your company. I accidentally recruited the Russian mob. Not one of my finer days. So the feds were on to them, which means now that the East Coast feds are on to me. And the last thing that happened, well, not the last thing, but the next thing that happened was I hadn't slept for a couple days, and I'm at a game. There's $20 million on the table, and I look around the table, and there's at least 2 to 3 seats of bad debt, meaning people that I don't really think can pay. And so I did the one thing that I said I would never do, and I started taking a rake. I started taking a percentage of the pots, which put me in direct violation of the federal statute. I did that. I said I would only do it once. Of course, I didn't. I kept doing it. And the feds had put a confidential informant in the game. So now they knew that I was breaking the law. And then the last thing that happened was, I was running the biggest poker game in New York City. You would imagine that the mob would the Italian mob would get wind of this, and they did. And it all came to a head in late 2010. I had a driver who had worked for me for 5 years, trusted the guy, and he said to me, I drive these New Jersey hedge fund guys that would love to play in your game. Can I set up a meeting? And I said, sure. I met them at this swanky bar in Manhattan, and when they walked in, it was very clear to me. They were not hedge fund guys. They looked like they had just rolled off the set of Goodfellas. They were not playing this down at all. Although, when I asked them what I could get them to drink, they ordered apple martinis. So that was a little strange, because it's not really like the classic tough guy drink, It's not like the movies. Anyway, so they got to business really fast, and they said, look, it's great what you've been able to build. If you want to continue to operate, you need to partner with us. We'll make your life a lot easier. We'll collect, we'll handle. Obviously, I couldn't do this. I couldn't get into bed with violent criminals. So I politely declined their offer. I paid for their apple martinis. And I left. And they kept calling me, and I kept ducking their phone calls. And around Christmas time, I got a knock at the door, and I thought it was my doorman bringing up some packages. And there was a strange man standing outside, pushed his way in, and this is what happened.
Sorry, you're in the wrong. Wait, okay, hold on a second.
Not a sound. You get me?
I have money. It's all cash.
Where?
It's safe.
Where's it?
It's in the closet.
Show me. Put the money and jewelry in a bag. Gold bars, too.
Come on.
Open your mouth. Open your mouth. It wasn't an offer they made. It wasn't a suggestion. This will be your only reminder. Your mother lives alone in Telluride, Colorado. Right? Right? Right, Molly?
She doesn't live there anymore.
I see that.
So it had gotten really dark and really dangerous. And now, not only am I putting my own life in jeopardy, I'm putting the lives of the people that I love most who did not deserve this. And I was too scared, and I didn't know what to do, and I didn't call the cops, and I didn't tell anyone. And I sat in my apartment, and I waited for my face to heal, and I waited for their phone call. And I had no idea what I was going to say to them when they called me, because it was clear that it wasn't an option to turn them down anymore, and I just had no idea. 1 week went by, nothing. 2 weeks, I started to get real confused. The third week, I got the New York Times delivered to my house. And on the cover, it said 125 people arrested in the biggest mob-related takedown in New York City history. And I never heard from them again. But let me paint you a picture. On the West Coast, you have celebrities, Ponzi schemes, playing in illegal poker games. On the East Coast, you've got the Italian mob, the Russian mob, politicians, Wall Street figures, all playing in these illegal poker games, and it's all connected through Molly Bloom. So I'm sure you can guess who enters in next. It was the feds. They showed up at one of my poker games in 2011. I got tipped off by one of my dealers. They said, "Don't come here, the FBI's here looking for you." And that was one of the scariest moments of my life. And I just can remember thinking, like, I just want to get home to Colorado and be with my mom. That's what I wanted to do. So I went to my apartment expecting to see, the full FBI force in my lobby, and they weren't there. And I packed a bag and I headed to JFK, thinking maybe they'll be there, I don't know. I tried to buy a plane ticket, and my credit card was declined, which was strange. And I used another card, and that was declined. I logged into my accounts, and I saw that all my accounts had been seized. I'd lost every cent, millions of dollars in an instant. The Fed seized everything. I got home. I made it to my mom's house. I called my lawyer. They called the feds, and the feds said, "We have on good evidence that she has been making her money illegally, and so we have seized her money. We're not pursuing any criminal indictment right now, but if she wants to go on record and tell us how she made this illegal money, then we might." So I went away. I moved in with my mom. I didn't have any money. I didn't even have a bank account. They were all shut down. All the beach houses, the penthouse apartments, the cars, the friends, the parties, it was all gone. And I got in bed and stayed there for a couple weeks feeling really, really sorry for myself. Till my mom came in my room and said, "That's it, you need to get some fresh air." Because my mom thinks that fresh air will fix anything. My mom lives in the mountains, it's like Legends of the Fall up there. And so I went outside to humor her, and she's, as usual, kind of right. Because there are those mountains that I was raised on. And I was raised that when you fall down, you get back up. And so the first thing I had to do was get clean and get sober. And I had to take responsibility for this whole mess, because it was all my fault. Nobody forced my hand. I had done all of this. And then what I needed to do was I needed to figure out a way to live. So I started trying to get a job. It took me a while. It took me about 2 years to get a job, and I got a job. I moved back to LA into this modest little apartment. And 5 days after I moved back, and I got a phone call in the middle of the night. The voice on the other end of the phone said, "This is Agent so-and-so from the FBI. You need to come out of your apartment with your hands up, or we're breaking down the door." I walked out into the hallway, and when my eyes adjusted to the high-beam flashlights, I saw that my whole hallway was stacked. 17 FBI agents, semi-automatic weapons pointed at me. They put me in handcuffs. They put a piece of paper in front of me that said, "The United States of America versus Molly Bloom," and you don't want to be on the other side of that. I had a day and a half to get to New York to find a criminal attorney who's going to represent me in the fight of my life, and I don't have a dime. My last meeting before I had to be arraigned in court, I met Jim Walden. He was a former federal prosecutor, had gone on to become a big defense attorney. And he said, "I don't know what happened to you, kid, but everything you do for the next minute, the next hour, will determine the rest of your life, and you need help." And so he took on my case and said, "We'll worry about the money later." I wrote him an IOU in that office. And I paid him, eventually. So we went to meet with the prosecutors. And the prosecutors said to me, "Molly Bloom, we think that you ran these illegal, high-stakes poker games for 8 years, that you had financial and personal, intimate entanglements with these players, Wall Street players, politicians, celebrities. We think you know things that can help us take down some people." And they were probably right. They were right. And they said, "If you help us, if you become a confidential informant, we'll give you back all your money, and we'll give you full immunity. But if you don't, we're going for real jail time." And You know, it's a hard choice, hard call. But I thought about it for a while, and, you know, a couple years ago, I had taken responsibility for my actions, and I had been determined to do that. These were consequences that I was facing based on my actions. All these people did, all the clients did, were show up to my games, support me, and make me money. So to turn on them in this instance just didn't feel right. And so I turned down their offer, and I waited to be sentenced. And I got real lucky with the judge that I got in my case. He was very disappointed in my life choices. He made that super clear. But he said, listen, I don't believe in overpopulating prisons with a girl that raked a game of Texas Hold'em. So the good news is I didn't have to go to jail. The bad news is I had to go to dinner with my family that night. And Jordan had just graduated Harvard, and Jeremy had just got inducted into the Colorado Sports Hall of Fame. And I'm a convicted felon, you know? And I'm like, this dinner table has got to end, right? I need a massive rebranding campaign. And so I decided that I would go for it, you know? And I thought that the way out was the story. I thought the story was the way out. And so I decided that I would write the book, and then I would go get a prolific screenwriter to write the movie. And everybody told me I was crazy. But I just, you know, I went to lawyers and managers and anyone who would listen to me, and I said, can I get a meeting with Aaron Sorkin? Because he was my favorite writer, and I thought that he wrote with a damn lot of humanity and intelligence. And so finally I got a meeting with him, and I told him my story. And he said, he listened, and then he leaned back in his chair, and he said, man, I've never met someone so down on their luck and so full of themselves. I was like, so are you in? And he was. And so 4 years ago, I was pleading guilty in federal court. And last year, I got to go to the Oscars. What a country. So, you know, poker's got a lot of metaphorical significance to life. You've got a set of data in front of you, mathematics, statistics, human behavior. You have to make choices, and those choices have consequences. And I watched these games. I watched thousands of hours of some of the world's most prolific people play this game. And there always emerged a winner's circle and a loser's circle. And everyone always said the winners were lucky and the losers were unlucky, but that wasn't the story, you know? The winners had a certain amount of mental mastery over their emotions. They were able to stay out of greed. They were able to make rational choices. They didn't have revenge. You know, they weren't seeking revenge. They were sticking to their intellectual choices. They played the long game. They weren't just looking at what's in front of them. They were looking 5 steps out. And the last thing I find to be the most interesting and most significant was, by far and large, the winners were nicer people. They were nicer to the staff. They were nicer to their families. They had better reputations. They seemed to like themselves more. So maybe there's not so much to this luck thing, and it's more about how you show up in the world, especially when it gets turbulent, because turbulent it gets, you know? But in my life, I have seen that these turbulent moments, these times we fall upon hard times, are moments of great opportunity. And the main difference between an ordinary and an extraordinary life is simply the willingness to get back up, no matter how many times it takes. Because it's only then that we start to tap into this true capacity that we have inside, which, you know, kind of tells us that we have as many lives as we need. That's certainly been my experience. But it's hard. You know, it's hard when you come onto hard times, or when you have a big dream, or when you've blown your whole life up. And the way back can be real sticky. It takes a lot of guts, a lot of heart, but the most basic thing it takes is hope. So my sincere wish is that I've been able to impart a message of hope and redemption and reinvention here with you today, and it's been a real honor. Thank you so much.